Hello and welcome to another Tri-tutors video. In today's video we're going to be unpacking the poem The Shipwreck by Emily Dickinson. So a little bit of information about our poet. This is always important as it gives the context to the poem and it makes our understanding of the poem a lot richer and deeper. Emily Dickinson lived between 1830 and 1886. She was an American poet, and only 10 of her poems were actually published during her lifetime. The rest were published after her death. And a lot of her poems are about this key theme, which is the power of nature, and we're definitely going to see that come across in this poem. So our title, The Shipwreck, we can understand this quite literally. This is a poem about a shipwreck that occurred near this coastal town and how it has become this sort of story and this legend that is told to children, but it's a really harrowing and traumatic tale. If we can look at we can say that that's a definite article. So this is a specific shipwreck that the children are being told about. And the connotations of a shipwreck is tragedy and destruction, and really also the power of nature, because if you think of a ship as a symbol of man's ability to create, and then the fact that it can be wrecked by a storm shows that ultimately no matter what man does, nature always has the upper hand. Nature has the ability to destroy whatever humanity whatever successes humanity has, nature has this ability to tear that apart. So ultimately nature is the superior power. Our first stanza. Glee. The great storm is over. 4 have recovered the land. 40 gone down together into the boiling sand. So it's quite an ironic and shocking first word, because our title is The Shipwreck, and then we start off with glee, which is like this unadulterated joy. So it's a really unexpected start. We also have this exclamation mark, which is emphasizing how emphatic it is, how excited people are that the storm is finally over. And so there's this sort of contradiction, because as much as the shipwreck is going to cause all this drama and cause all this pain and so many people are going to die and there's this really big loss, at the same time there's this sense of appreciation for those who survived, and also for the fact that the rest of the town has escaped the dangers of the storm and the effects of it. The great storm is over. Great, emphasizing how big and damaging it was. And the storm obviously caused the shipwreck. Another exclamation mark emphasizes the fact that the storm is over and this is a cause for celebration. 4 have recovered the land. So 4 of the people who were on the ship have made it back to land. So there have been 4 survivors. And now we're going to have a semicolon at the end of that line. And that semicolon is going to indicate a complete change, a complete shift when we go to the next line, because now it tells us about the people who haven't made it. 40 gone down together. Gone down, well, it can be literal in the sense that they've gone down into the sea, but it could also be a euphemism because they have died. They went down together. They all went the same way. They all drowned. And it's sort of this question after the first line, like, why is there so much glee if 40 have gone down together, if 40 have died? But as we discussed that contradiction earlier of this happiness that the storm is over and some people have survived, but there has been this great tragic loss as well. Into the boiling sand. Notice the enjambment on those lines. Enjambment, the run-on lines. So 40 gone down together into the boiling sand. It could fit on one line. It's one sentence or one clause, and it's been split up here over 2 lines, and that enjambment emphasizes how the sea took them quickly without any hesitation. Into the boiling sand. This is a metaphor, obviously, right? There's not actually boiling sand, but if you think of boiling, if you think of like a kettle boiling, it bubbles up really violently. And so this is a metaphor for the rough sea, which is sort of like looks like it's boiling, it's bubbling, it's making these big waves. And this image of sand, it's almost like quicksand, like it's taking all these people as the ship is being destroyed. It is like sort of the sea is opening up and it's bubbling and it's taking all these people down with it. And it's almost like it's seizing the bodies to the bottom of the sea. Ring for the scant salvation, toll for the bonny souls, neighbour and friend and bridegroom spinning upon the shoals. So we continue on, and we're still being very sad and very somber um, in the stanza. Just like the first stanza, we're going to see there's a little bit of a shift later on in the poem. We actually are in the moment in the first two stanzas where it's actually happening. The storm has happened, and now we're dealing with the repercussions. Whereas later on in the poem, we're going to see how the story has become a sort of legend which is told to children. Ring. So in those days, remember we're talking about the 1800s. The 1800s is when this poem has been written. Um, so you would ring the church bells to get the town's attention, right? Because obviously technology was very different at that time. So in order to get people's attention, you would ring the bell, and everyone would know that something, was wrong then, and they would come and try and help. So they ring the bell to get everyone's attention. For the scant salvation. Scant means few or scarce. Salvation, been saved. The few that have been saved, they need people to come and help them, to come and make sure that they're all right. Toll for the bonny souls. Now, this toll can be referred to two different things. So we know we use the word toll when we talk about like the death toll, and we're talking about the souls that didn't make it here. The reference to souls indicates that they are no longer with us, that they have died. But it can also mean another instruction, like ring, to ring the bell. The bell must toll. The toll is the ring of the bell. And perhaps the ring of the bell is commemorating the dead. For the bonny souls, bonny means beautiful or beloved. So perhaps the church bells are providing, a sense of remembrance to these souls. And if we look over here at the dash is really significant because a dash indicates an explanation or an elaboration that is following. So now we're getting more information about who these souls were, and it makes it all the more emphatic and all the more depressing and traumatic once we find out who these people are. These are not just random people to the speaker. Neighbor and friend and bridegroom. So neighbor, this is happening like in the speaker's town. She knows these people's friend. Bridegroom, even more emphatic, because a bridegroom is someone, well, it's the groom, so they're about to start this new life. And this has been tragically cut short. So members of the community, the speaker knows these people and emphasizes the tragic feelings and consequences of the shipwreck. Spinning upon the shoals. This spinning, this participle, the ing, it indicates this continuation of suffering for the dead as the dying as the people are watching, like spinning upon the shoals. It's almost like maybe their death wasn't so sudden, maybe it was long-lived, that they were suffering, but also the people watching are the people who have survived, or the people who are just on land. They're watching this and they're seeing this tragedy unfold. So the speaker and the community are watching helplessly as the dead continue to spin upon the shores. The shores are shallow water, so it's almost like these people are getting even more traumatized, not just losing these people, but they can actually see their bodies on the water. And it makes it all the more tragic because this ship seems to have been close to the shore, yet 40 of them died. They couldn't be rescued. That's the power of nature. And that exclamation mark, once again, is really just emphasizing the drama, emphasizing the trauma of this event. Moving on to stanza 3, now we have a little bit of a shift. So we're no longer in the moment when the shipwreck is happening. Now we're talking about how the shipwreck is going to be remembered and how the tale is going to be told to children. How to sort of deal with this tragedy, the aftermath of it. How will they tell the shipwreck when winter shakes the door? Till the children ask, but the 40, did they come back no more? So how will they tell the shipwreck? How can this horrible and horrendous story ever be recounted? When winter shakes the door, this is personification. This emphasizes the power of nature because winter does not really have the ability to shake the door, right? That is a human quality that you are able to do that. And so winter is a symbol of the storm and the stormy conditions. And what is winter? If we think of the connotations of winter, we think of a storm, we think something threatening. We think of nature being powerful. So the question is asked here, well, when these stormy conditions come back to town, when they're shaking our door, when they're threatening to have another tragic storm, what are we going to tell the children? door, if we think about a door and what a door does, it's put into place for protection. And so the question is asked now, what are we going to do when our protection and our safety is threatened again when winter comes? Because as winter comes, it's going to be reminding the community of the storm that caused this terrible shipwreck. Till the children ask. If you think about children, we think innocent, we think naive. Maybe these children were too young. Maybe they were not there even when the shipwreck happened, and now they want to know what actually happened during this moment. Why perhaps all the adults are fearful when winter shakes the door. But the 40, the question mark, the children ask to know literally like what actually happened to those 40 people. And the question mark emphasizes the sense of helplessness and disbelief of the people. There's been so much tragedy that has occurred, and of such a magnitude. This tragedy has been truly impressive in size. It's been so immense. Did they come back no more? So we see two question marks there, and that's, really emphasizes the tragedy, and sort of like, when you have such a tragedy, you ask all these questions because it doesn't seem real. Will they ever come back? The children ask, emphasizes the finality of the tragedy. They're lost forevermore. Also notice the use of inverted commas here. This makes it really conversational and really authentic, because there's this direct connection. We can actually hear the exact words that the children are asking. So it's really making it all the more vivid and all the more real for us as the readers. Our final stanza. Then a silence suffuses the story, and a softness the teller's eyes. And the children no further question, and only the waves reply. What a powerful and impactful end to this poem. And so after the children ask that question in stanza 3, then a silence suffuses the story. Suffuses is like it gradually spreads, and we can notice the alliteration of the S sound there, the sibilance or the sibilant sound. It's almost like mimics this whisper sound. The sort of the silence is dispersing throughout the room as the adults quieten down, because no adult wants to break the terrible news of the 40 deaths, the souls who will never return. And so this alliteration, the sibilance, emphasizes the sadness and also the slow realization of the children as suddenly all the adults go quiet. And a softness, the teller's eyes. So maybe a tear comes to the teller's eyes. We don't know his or her. We don't know really who the teller is, but maybe tears and softness in their eye. Maybe they start to tear up. And the children no further question. So the children become intuitive. They recognize the silence of the adults. They understand why the adults have fallen silent. And I think that's something perhaps that children do often that maybe adults we don't realize, but they are very in tune with what adults are feeling. They can read those nonverbal cues, and they can read this as the adults go silent. They can recognize what has actually happened. No one needs to tell them. They can recognize that this tragedy occurred, that these souls cannot be recovered, and how the adults in the community are still dealing with that pain. Then no further question. They're not going to ask again. And only the waves reply. Nothing that the children or adults can do or say can make it bearable. The waves have the last word. Nature is powerful. It's such a terrible tragedy that adults don't even try and make sense of it or come up with something for the children. That's how deep of a tragedy it is. And the fact that it ends with the waves replying, that the waves have the last word, it really emphasizes that theme we spoke about right at the beginning, that nature ultimately can overpower humanity, that nature is the real superior being. Notice the anaphora, our last 3 lines here. Anaphora, the repetition of a word or phrase at the start of subsequent lines. And this emphasizes the continuing sadness of the tragedy. It doesn't get better with the retelling. It's still heartbreaking. The structure of our poem, stanza 1 and 2 is what's actually happening with the shipwreck, and stanza 3 and 4 is how it will be remembered and retold. We have a rhyme scheme in this poem. So in the first stanza, it's A, B, A, B, and then continuing on, the second and the fourth lines of each stanza rhyme. And that rhyme scheme is really effective in terms of showing us how this story has become sort of a legend or a myth. Not a myth per se, but a legend or a story that's been told to generations. It almost has that fable like quality. Like, this is a story, this is a reminder of the tragedy that happened, but also perhaps if you read deeper on the power of nature and how we must always recognize how nature can ultimately overpower human beings. The tone, at different times, it's sort of a different tone, so understand which lines the question is referring to, and then you can answer the tone question. Earnest, solemn, despairing, sorrowful, disheartening, depressing, introspective, reflective, and somber. At times optimistic, like the first two lines are quite optimistic, so it really depends on where you are in the poem. The mood is somber and reflective, slightly joyful at the start, but then it becomes more somber and reflective. The theme of the message: grief, the power of nature, tragedy, and the effects of tragedy, dealing with the tragedy. And perhaps even a sense of recognizing silver linings, but understanding the extent of a tragedy, and in this case, the tragedy attributed to nature. I hope that you found that video helpful. Please remember to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.